Magandang araw sa inyong lahat and welcome once again to another pre-recorded lecture for our class in Concepts in Pediatrics. Before we proceed to fetal circulation, we first have a review of how neonatal circulation happens. So always remember that when the rest of your body parts have already consumed the oxygen in the red blood cells, magiging unoxygenated blood na po yung mga dugo. Now, depending on the position of the body part or the tissue, iba po yung dadaanan nila to go back to the heart. Always remember that the unoxygenated blood will pass the veins. Dadaan po sila dito, both in the upper and lower parts of the body. And then veins po ang dadaanan nila. And then for the lower part of the body, they will enter the heart using the inferior vena cava. And for the upper parts of the body, they will enter the heart through the superior vena cava. And then after they reach the heart, yung mga unoxygenated blood po natin ay pupunta doon sa right atrium. Now, when the heart beats, the blood that is in the right atrium will pass the tricuspid valve going to the right ventricle. So, nandito na po yung mga dugo na unoxygenated kanina. Now, on the second beating of the heart, yung mga dugo po on the right ventricle will also pass the pulmonary artery. Okay? And then, they will go towards the lungs. And yung unoxygenated blood kanina will now become oxygenated. So we will already be using the symbol positive kasi meron na po siyang dugo. Now, the oxygenated blood that is in the lungs will have to go back to the heart for distribution. Okay? So ano yung dadaanan nila? It will pass the pulmonary vein. So dito po sila dadaan. And then, they will now reach the left atrium. Now, pagpitik ulit ng puso, the blood that is in the left atrium will be pushed to the bicuspid valve. Dito sila dadaan and now they will reach the left ventricle. And then, the ventricles will contract and then they will push the oxygenated blood going to the aorta. So again, depende ulit sa position ng cells or tissues. There is an ascending aorta which will distribute blood to the upper parts of the body, and then there will be the descending aorta which will distribute oxygenated blood to the different parts of the body. Ang tawag po natin sa daanan naman ng mga oxygenated blood is the artery. Okay? So when they reach the upper and lower parts of the body, this oxygenated blood will become consumed. At anong mangyayari? They will now become unoxygenated. And then the cycle goes on and on. So that is the neonatal circulation. Now, we go back to the concept of fetal circulation. Always remember na hindi po sila pareho. Bakit sila hindi pareho? Because there are accessory structures that are present in the fetal circulation na hindi na po natin nakikita sa neonatal circulation. At ano-ano yung mga yon? Number 1, we have the ductus arteriosus. Wala pong ductus arteriosus sa neonatal circulation. We also have the foramen ovale, okay, which is an opening between the right and left atrium. We also have the ductus venosus. Wala pong ganon sa neonatal circulation. Along with the ductus arteriosus. So, hindi ko makita kung nasan siya. Alright? We also have the umbilical vein and the umbilical arteries, umbilical cord, the placenta. Wala po tayong mga ganyan in the neonatal circulation. Ano pa yung isang difference aside from the fact na marami tayong fetal accessory structure? Okay? Ang isa pang difference po is in the neonatal circulation, dito po kanina, ang center of oxygenation natin ay dito po sa lungs. Okay? Dito po nagkakaroon ng oxygenation. Alright? But, in the fetal circulation, hindi po lungs ang nagbibigay ng oxygen sa dugo, kundi ang placenta. Okay? Okay? So the placenta is the center for oxygenation in the fetal circulation. Kaya naman malaki ang difference po ng fetal circulation sa neonatal circulation. Alright. Now, medyo complicated yung ating drawing dito, but I have already simplified a copy of it so that you will better understand how fetal circulation happens. So if you are looking at this drawing right now, you can pause the video. Pwede nyo pong i-pause yung video natin and then you copy the drawing that you have right now, or better yet, kung na-print nyo po yung ating lecture ngayon, maganda po kung makakasunod kayo. Alright. Now, always remember po that the start of the fetal circulation is in the placenta. Ano nga po pala yung function ng placenta? It aims to deliver oxygenated blood from the mother towards the baby. Okay. So, always remember that in the placenta, meron na po tayo ditong oxygenated blood. Bakit? Kasi nga, dito po sa placenta nanggagaling or nangyayari yung oxygenation. Okay po ba? Now, when the placenta absorbs oxygenated blood from the uterus of the mother, it is passed to the baby. Pero ano yung dadaanan niya? Always remember na meron po tayong tinatawag na umbilical cord. Yung umbilical cord po natin, meron siyang ava. Okay, na-discuss na po natin ito. 1 vein and 2 arteries. Okay? So, palitan natin ito para mas maganda. So, 1 vein and 2 arteries. Okay po ba? Now, always remember that oxygenated blood will pass from the placenta going to the umbilical vein. So, dito po. Okay? So, dadaan po siya dito from the placenta going here. Alright? So, dumaan siya sa umbilical vein. And then, pagpasok po sa skin, dito po sa navel, medyo yan tipuseg, medyo ubing, ang tawag na po natin doon sa blood vessel na yon is already the ligamentum venosum. Alright. So, pagpasok po from the placenta, the oxygenated blood will pass the umbilical vein. Okay, dito po, dadaan. And then, pagpasok po sa skin or sa navel ng bata, alright, kunwari ito na yung umbilical area. Ang tawag na po sa blood vessel na yon is already the ligamentum venosum. Alright? Now, always remember po na meron ng malaking organ na malapit doon sa navel natin or sa umbilical point natin. At ang tawag sa organ na yon is liver. Always remember that the liver is necessary for blood production. So, ginagamit natin yan para makabuo yung dugo, yung katawan ng fetus ng kanyang sariling dugo. So, the liver is a very vital organ during the growth of the child. So, remember na dahil sa oxygenated blood na po ito, ay kailangan na pong mabigyan agad-agad ng oxygen yung liver. So, the oxygenated blood will go to the liver for nourishment. Okay? Kailangan nating in-nourish si liver. Okay? Pero bago siya makapunta sa liver, it needs to pass the ductus venosus. Ito pong color pink na ito. Ang tawag po natin dito ay ductus venosus. Okay? It is the bypass from the ligamentum venosum going to the liver. So, ulitin natin ha. From the placenta, there is oxygenated blood. It goes to the umbilical vein. And then, pagpasok po sa navel or umbilical point, ang tawag na po natin sa vein na yon is the ligamentum venosum. And then, meron siyang shortcut papunta sa liver. Ang tawag natin sa daanan na yon is the ductus venosus. Now, always remember that the umbilical vein or the ligamentum venosum is located on the lower part of the body. Mas mababa po siya kesa sa puso. So, tignan nyo yung inyong puseg or umbilical area is mas mababa kesa sa puso. So, you have to remember na ang dadaanan po ng mga dugo na yon is they will pass from the navel, ligamentum venosum, dadaan po sila sa inferior vena cava. Okay po ba? So, remember, yung dugo po, nandito na. Okay. Now, dahil po sa oxygenated, dahil po sa sobrang taas ng oxygen content ng dugo na oxygenated blood, there is also high pressure. Okay. Malaki po ang pressure dito sa right side of the heart because of the presence of the oxygen in the blood. Now, dahil po dyan, ang mangyayari ay madidivide yung puso. Hindi puso, madidivide yung dugo. Bakit siya madidivide? Kasi dito po sa fetal structure natin, hindi lang po yung tricuspid valve. Ito po, hindi lang po tricuspid valve ang pwedeng daanan ng dugo. There is also another opening that is present in the heart. Ang tawag po natin doon is the foramen ovale. So, saan po natatagpuan si foramen ovale? The foramen ovale is seen between the right and the left atrium. So, ano pong itsura ni foramen ovale? Ganito po. Para siyang one-way door. Okay. So, mas malaki po ang opening ng foramen ovale as compared to the right at the tricuspid valve. Okay? So, dahil sa sobrang taas ng pressure on the right side of the heart, yung dugo, madidivide po yan. Okay? Into 3. So, what happens? Ito, yung 2/3 of the blood that is oxygenated, okay po ba? So, symbol natin is 2/3 para makabesa nyo 2/3 na oxygenated blood. And then this one naman is the 1/3 oxygenated blood. Okay. So, dahil sa mas malaki yung butas ni foramen ovale, the 2/3 oxygenated blood will pass from the right atrium going to the left atrium using the foramen ovale. Okay po ba? So, nandito na si 2/3 oxygenated blood. Now, what will happen? It will also follow the same pattern na nangyari sa ating neonatal circulation. So, pag pitik po ng puso, ang mangyayari since ito ay one-way door lang, pwedeng pupunta dito pero hindi pwedeng lumabas ng ganon. So what will happen on the 2/3 oxygenated blood? They will pass from the left atrium, pupunta na sila ngayon sa left ventricle. Okay, 2/3 oxygenated blood nandito po sa left ventricle na ngayon. Ulitin ko ha, dahil sa sobrang lakas ng pressure on the right side of the heart, what happens is that the oxygenated blood will be divided. Some will go to the foramen ovale and the others will go to the tricuspid valve. So, unahin natin yung 2/3 ng oxygenated blood. They will pass the foramen ovale. They will go to the left atrium. Pag pitik ulit ng puso, they will pass the bicuspid valve. Pupunta naman ngayon sila sa left ventricle. Now, when that happens, ang mangyayari is that yung 2/3 oxygenated blood, they will also enter the aorta. Okay? 2/3 oxygenated blood. And then, pupunta naman sila sa upper part of the body. Bakit kaya upper part of the body? Remember po na growth is cephalocaudal. Ibig sabihin, mas maraming growth and development na nangyayari sa upper part of your body kasi nandun po ang ating mga vital organs like your brain, your heart, your lungs, and so on. Kaya pupunta po ang 2/3 na oxygenated blood on the upper part of the body using the ascending aorta. Okay? So, nandito na po si 2/3 oxygenated blood. What will happen? Pag nandun na po sa upper parts of the body si 2/3 oxygenated blood, the body will consume it. Therefore, magiging 2/3 unoxygenated blood na po siya. And then what will happen again? They will pass the veins of the body, dadaan sila sa veins, and then babalik po sila papunta doon sa ating umbilical artery. Okay? Umbilical artery. Going back to the placenta for oxygenation. Okay po ba? Nakuha na po ba yung 2/3? Okay, ulitin po natin ha. In the 2/3 oxygenated blood, the blood will go from the right atrium going to the left atrium, from the left using the foramen ovale, from the left atrium going to the left ventricle using the bicuspid valve, from the left ventricle going to the aorta, going to the upper parts of the body, passing the ascending aorta, and then babalik po siya ulit using the umbilical artery. Okay, now that you got it, we also look at the 1/3 oxygenated blood. Ito naman po yung titignan natin ngayon. Now, yung 1/3 oxygenated blood, mas madali po yung kanyang passageway. Ang mangyayari po is dadaan po si 1/3 oxygenated blood going to the tricuspid valve. Okay? Pupunta po siya sa right ventricle. So, nandito na po si 1/3 oxygenated blood. Now, ang next na mangyayari po, from the right ventricle, the oxygenated blood will go to the pulmonary artery. Bakit kailangan niyang pumunta sa pulmonary artery? Pupunta siya sa pulmonary artery because some of the blood will have to go to the lungs. Yung ibang dugo, kailangang pumunta doon sa lungs. Bakit? Hindi naman siya ginagamit for oxygenation. The blood will go there for nourishment. Bakit? Kasi ito po yung unang organ na gagamitin ng bata pag siya ay pinanganak na. Okay? So, some of the blood will go to the lungs for nourishment sa 1/3 oxygenated blood, but majority of them ay kailangan nang i-distribute sa different parts of the body. So, ano yung gagamitin nilang daanan? So, nakikita nyo po ba ito? Itong daanan dito na nagko-connect ng pulmonary artery going to the aorta. Ang tawag po sa shortcut na yan ay we have the ductus arteriosus. Okay? The ductus arteriosus connects the pulmonary artery and the aorta. So, dahil sa kailangan ng katawan yung 1/3 oxygenated blood, so yung ibang dugo pupunta sa lungs, di ba? Using the pulmonary artery. Yung iba naman po, from the pulmonary artery, dadaan sila dito sa ductus arteriosus, and then they will reach the aorta. Okay, so nandito na po yung ating 1/3 oxygenated blood, and now they will go to the descending aorta, going to the different parts of the body using the arteries. Okay. Okay? And then, sa lower part of the body, the oxygen will be consumed. Therefore, yung 1/3 oxygenated blood natin naging 1/3 unoxygenated blood na po siya. Again, they will also pass the veins going back to the umbilical artery, going to the placenta for oxygenation. Okay. So, ganun lamang po kasimple yung ating diagram when we have your fetal circulation. So, ulitin po natin ha. Always remember that oxygenation happens in the placenta. So, nandito po nangyayari yung oxygenation natin. So, meaning, there are oxygenated blood that are present in the placenta. Now, what happens? The placenta will deliver oxygenated blood from the uterus, placenta, dadaan siya sa umbilical vein, and then pupunta siya sa ligamentum venosum. Sa ligamentum venosum na po yun, meron pong bypass going to the liver. Now, yung ibang dugo will go to the liver, passing the ductus venosus. Ito po, that's the ductus venosus. Dadaan yung ibang dugo, pupunta sa liver, passing the ductus venosus dahil kailangan ni liver ng nourishment. Now, majority of the blood will now enter from the ligamentum venosum, pupunta po siya sa inferior vena cava, and then it will go to the right atrium. Lagi pong tatandaan na dahil sa oxygenated po yung dugo that is found on the right atrium, ang mangyayari is there is a very high pressure on the right side of the heart. Dahil po dyan, yung dugo mahahati sa dalawa. Now, bakit siya mahahati? Kasi merong opening dito, meron ding opening dito. Okay, so ano ang mas malaking opening? It's the foramen ovale. So malamang doon dadaan si 2/3 oxygenated blood. Alright, now we talk about the journey of the 2/3 oxygenated blood. So dahil sa sobrang lakas ng pressure on the right side of the heart, the 2/3 or majority of the blood will pass from the right atrium going to the foramen ovale, going to the left atrium. So nandito na po yung ating 2/3 oxygenated blood. When the heart pumps again, the fetus heart pumps, dadaan po yung 2/3 oxygenated blood papunta po sa bicuspid valve, and then it will enter the left ventricle. So nandito na po yung ating 2/3 oxygenated blood. And then what happens? It will now enter the aorta. So nandito na po si 2/3 oxygenated blood. It will be distributed to the ascending aorta through the arteries. Bakit po sa upper part of the body mapupunta yung 2/3 oxygenated blood? Dahil po, growth is cephalocaudal and majority of the vital organs that we have are found on the upper parts of your body. Okay? So yung 2/3 oxygenated blood po, anong mangyayari? They will now be consumed by the body at magiging 2/3 unoxygenated blood na po siya. They will enter the veins and then pupunta na po sila pabalik doon kay umbilical artery. Okay? And then they will go back to the lungs for oxygenation. Now, we also talk about the 1/3 oxygenated oxygenated blood. What happens? In the 1/3 oxygenated blood, when the atrium of the heart pumps or beats, ang mangyayari, they will be pushed downwards, passing the tricuspid valve, going to the right ventricle. Pag nandun na po sila sa right ventricle, magko-contract ulit po yung lower part of the heart. Okay? And then pipitik po ito, yung ibang dugo na 1/3 po, they will pass the pulmonary artery. Saan po sila pupunta? Some of them will go to both left and right lungs. Bakit kailangan pumunta doon? For nourishment. And then what will happen next is that majority of the lungs that are found in the 1/3 will now go to the aorta. Saan po sila dadaan? They will pass the ductus arteriosus. Ito po yon. Okay? Dito po. And then the 1/3 oxygenated blood will go to the descending aorta, passing the different arteries. And then the 1/3 oxygenated blood will now become unoxygenated kasi i-consume na siya ng different parts of your body. They will pass the veins, dadaan po sila dito pabalik, and then going towards the umbilical artery, going back to the placenta for oxygenation. So that is how simple fetal circulation is. But if you want to have a simpler approach, let's try an algorithm. Okay? So, start po natin dito. From the placenta, ano pong dugo ang meron tayo dito? From the placenta, meron po tayong oxygenated blood. What will happen? The blood will go to the umbilical veins. Okay? Meron po tayong oxygenated blood dito. And then from the umbilical vein, so nandito na tayo, right? Okay, dito na po. From the umbilical vein, papasok yung dugo sa ligamentum venosum. Okay, so nandito na po yung dugo. Always remember that there is an organ here called the liver na kailangan ng nourishment. So some of the blood will go to the ductus venosus para makadating sa liver. Bakit kailangan pumunta sa liver? Because of the need for nourishment. Okay. Now, yung ibang dugo naman, they will pass the inferior vena cava dahil nga po yung ating navel ay mas mababa sa ating puso. Now, in the inferior vena cava, papasok na ngayon yung dugo sa right atrium. In the right atrium, remember, mataas po yung pressure. So what will happen? Because of the very high pressure, mahahati yung dugo. Yung isa, magiging 2/3 oxygenated blood. Yung isa, magiging 1/3 oxygenated blood. Okay, so unahin po natin yung 2/3 oxygenated blood. Saan po siya pupunta next? It will go to the foramen ovale, going to the left atrium. Nakakasunod ba? Okay. From the foramen ovale, going to the left atrium, saan next na pupunta? They will go to the aorta. And then, distributed to the different parts of the body, specifically sa upper part. Okay. And then, babalik siya using the umbilical artery going back to the placenta for oxygenation. Papunta naman po tayo sa 1/3 oxygenated blood. The 1/3 oxygenated blood will pass the tricuspid valve. Okay? From the left atrium, dadaan po muna pala siya sa ibahin natin ha. Ibahin po natin. Mayroon akong nakalimutan. From the left atrium, pupunta muna siya sa bicuspid valve. Okay? And then going to the left ventricle, papunta sa aorta to be distributed to the different parts of the body. Okay po ba? So, ulitin natin. 2/3 oxygenated blood will go to the foramen ovale. Okay? Will go to the left atrium. Will go to the bicuspid valve. And then to the left ventricle going towards the aorta. Okay. Next, we also have the 1/3 oxygenated blood. Pupunta po siya sa tricuspid valve. So, dadaan po siya from here. Okay, from here, going there. So, dadaan siya sa tricuspid valve, papunta sa right ventricle. Okay, so from the tricuspid valve, dadaan po siya sa right ventricle. And then what will happen next is, from the right ventricle, yung iba pupunta po sa pulmonary artery. And then they will go to the lungs for nourishment. Okay. However, majority of it will go to the ductus arteriosus, which connects the pulmonary artery and the aorta. So, ito pong daanan na to, ang tinatawag po natin dyan ay ductus arteriosus. Pabalik sa aorta, going to the different parts of the body. So, that is our fetal circulation. Ulitin po natin para mas maintindihan po natin lalo. From the placenta oxygenated blood, they will pass the umbilical vein. After passing the umbilical vein, they will go to the ligamentum venosum, while some of the blood will go to the liver using the ductus venosus for nourishment. Alright. Now, other blood will go to the oxygenated blood will go to the inferior vena cava. Papasok sila sa right atrium. And then, the blood will be in the right atrium already dahil sa sobrang lakas ng pressure, magdi-divide into 3 po ito yung dugo. Now, the 2/3 oxygenated blood will go from the right atrium, going to the foramen ovale, going to the left atrium. Pagkatapos po niyan, yung 2/3 oxygenated blood will pass the bicuspid valve dito, going to the left ventricle. From the left ventricle, they will now enter the aorta, okay, which will now pass the ascending aorta, going to the upper parts of the body. which will now become unoxygenated because the oxygen is already consumed. They will have to go back to the placenta using the veins and the umbilical arteries. Pabalik pong ganon. Next, we also have the 1/3 oxygenated blood. Yung 1/3 oxygenated blood naman po, dahil sa mas konti sila, dito sila sa mas maliit dadaan, which is your tricuspid valve. They will go to the right ventricle, right? And then some of them will go to the pulmonary artery, which will now nourish both left and right lungs. Pero, yung iba, pupunta po dito sa ductus arteriosus, which will now connect it to the aorta. So, from the pulmonary artery, dadaan sila sa ductus arteriosus, papunta sa aorta, and then they will now be distributed to the descending aorta to the different parts of the body. After it becomes consumed, yung 1/3 oxygenated blood po, magiging 1/3 unoxygenated blood na. And then they will go back to the veins, going to the umbilical artery, going back to the placenta for oxygenation. So that's how simple fetal circulation is. I hope you learned something from me today, and I hope that you get ready for the first quiz next meeting. Again, maraming salamat po, and keep safe everyone.